Long ago, in a village nestled at the edge of a great forest, there lived a humble farmer named Kojo. Kojo was known for his hard work and diligence, spending each day tending to his small farm. He grew maize, yams, and plantains, just enough to feed himself and his family. Though life was simple, Kojo was content, for he had a beautiful wife, Afia, and two bright-eyed children, Kofi and Oma. The village where Kojo lived was peaceful, its people bound by tradition and the rhythms of nature. But just beyond the safety of the village lay the dense and mysterious forest, a place the villagers approached with caution. They whispered of strange happenings there, speaking of powerful spirits and trickster creatures that lured the unsuspecting into danger. One evening, as Kojo returned from his farm, he overheard a conversation among the village elders at the meeting tree. "The harvest this year is bountiful," one elder said, "but there is a place, deep in the forest, where crops grow like no other. There, the land is fertile beyond imagination. A single seed will yield 10 times more than here in the village fields. But beware, for that part of the forest is said to be guarded by the spirits." Kojo's ears perked up. Fertile land that could multiply his harvest. His thoughts raced. With such a harvest, he could provide a better life for his family. The whispers of the danger seemed distant, almost trivial compared to the opportunity he imagined. Kojo's desire for more began to eclipse the warnings. That night, as the moon rose high in the sky, Kojo could hardly sleep. Visions of abundant crops and wealth filled his mind. He thought of how he could buy new tools, build a larger house, and give his children an education in the nearby town. "If only I could reach that part of the forest," he thought, "I could change everything for the better." Early the next morning, Kojo confided in his wife Afia. "I have heard of a place where crops grow in abundance, deep in the forest. I must go and see it for myself," he said with excitement. Afia, however, was wary. "The elders have warned us for generations never to venture too deep into the forest, Kojo. The spirits guard those lands, and no one who has gone there has ever returned the same." But Kojo brushed off her concerns. "I am not afraid of spirits," he replied, standing tall. "I will return before nightfall, and with riches beyond our imagination." Afia sighed but could not dissuade him. She knew Kojo's stubbornness, and once he set his mind on something, nothing could turn him back. Reluctantly, she packed him a small bundle of food, and with the first light of dawn, Kojo set off toward the forbidden part of the forest. As he entered the dense woods, the atmosphere grew strange. The birdsong that usually filled the air became quieter, and the trees seemed taller, their branches twisting in unnatural shapes. The deeper Kojo went, the more otherworldly the forest became. Still, he pressed on, driven by the thought of the fertile land and the wealth it promised. After hours of walking, Kojo finally came upon a clearing. And there, just as the elders had said, lay a vast field of the greenest crops he had ever seen. The land stretched endlessly, and every plant seemed to shimmer with health. The sight took his breath away. "This must be the land of the spirits," Kojo whispered to himself, "but look at this bounty." He knelt down and examined the soil. It was rich and dark, perfect for planting. His heart raced with excitement. Without a second thought, he reached into his sack, pulled out a handful of seeds, and began to plant. Suddenly, the wind shifted, and a low, eerie voice echoed through the trees. "Who dares to plant in the land of the spirits without offering tribute?" Kojo froze, his heart pounding. He looked around but saw no one. The voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Remembering the stories of the spirits, Kojo tried to steady his voice. I mean no harm. I am just a humble farmer, seeking to provide for my family." The voice replied, this time colder. "The land you seek to claim is not for mortals to take. If you wish to harvest from it, you must first give something in return." Kojo hesitated. He had no gift for the spirits, no offering to make. In his haste to reach the land, he had ignored the old traditions. I have nothing to offer, Kojo said quietly, a knot forming in his stomach. The wind howled, and the trees seemed to close in around him. The voice grew sharper. Then you shall pay with that which you hold most dear. Before Kojo could protest, a great gust of wind swept over him, knocking him to the ground. When he opened his eyes, the lush field had vanished. He was no longer in the fertile clearing but in a barren wasteland. The crops, the rich soil, everything was gone. Desperation filled him as he tried to find his way back, but the forest twisted and turned, leaving him disoriented. Hours passed, then days, as Kojo wandered the forest, unable to find his way home. Meanwhile, in the village, Afia and the children waited anxiously. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no sign of Kojo. Afia feared the worst. The villagers murmured about the foolishness of venturing into the spirit's domain. Had he listened to the warnings, he would be here with his family, they said. As time went on, Afia accepted that her husband was lost. She did her best to provide for her children, but life grew harder without Kojo's help. They struggled, surviving only on the charity of the village. One fateful day, months after Kojo's disappearance, a figure emerged from the forest, gaunt and unrecognizable. It was Kojo, but he was a shadow of his former self. His clothes were torn, his face was hollow, and his eyes carried the weight of deep regret. "I am sorry," he whispered as he collapsed at Afia's feet. "Had I known, I would never have gone." The villagers gathered around, watching as Afia wept over her husband's frail body. Kojo had returned, but the cost of his greed and stubbornness had been great. He had lost his health, his spirit, and nearly his family, all for a dream of riches that were never meant to be his. From that day on, the village spoke of Kojo's tale as a warning to those who sought to defy the spirits and take more than what was their due. The elders would say, had he known, he would have stayed in the safety of what he had. And so, the lesson was passed down through the generations, to be content with what one has, for sometimes the pursuit of more can lead to the loss of everything.